Hello, everyone. Welcome to the virtual information session related to our Professional Development Awards and Trainee Research Awards. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started and, wait for others to come in. Welcome again to our virtual information session related to Professional Development Awards and Trainee Research Awards. Really, the purpose of the presentation today is to cover some of the basic aspects related to the awards, including eligibility, requirements, what we're sort of looking for in applications, and finally, just to answer any questions you might have. Like I mentioned again, information session is being recorded and will be available for your reference later. All right, just to start off, want to introduce ourselves. My name is Ishan Dasgupta. I'm a program officer at the foundation, and I lead our Dana NextGen program, which is really our trainee-focused program.
Hi everyone, I'm Chinmaya Balusu, and I'm a Neuro and Society Fellow at the Foundation, and I work closely with Ishan on the Dana NextGen program.
And yeah, we're both really excited to offer these awards. We did offer the Professional Development Awards last year, but I think part of this comes from the fact that both of us come from really interdisciplinary backgrounds and often found it really difficult to find meaningful funding for trainees to seek out opportunities outside of our sort of core degrees. So that's a big part of the motivation for why we develop these awards, just to sort of give people an opportunity to sort of step outside their, sort of core curricula and gain additional skills. So here's an overview of what we'll be covering today. We'll start off with a little information about the foundation, a little bit about its history. Next, we'll discuss our mission and values. Our own values are a really important part of a foundation's process of grant making, and we encourage all our applicants to review the values while you work on your proposals. So next, we'll briefly talk about the Dana NextGen program, a little bit about what Chinmay and I are trying to do with that program. Then we'll get into the details of the awards themselves. We'll walk through sort of the nitty-gritty of that. And finally, we want to, cover some of the questions that we've already received from trainees and then open it up to any questions that the rest of you might have. So just a little bit about the Dana Foundation. Believe it or not, this is actually, we've been around for almost 75 years. This year will mark our 75th anniversary. I think just to say a little bit about our mission and vision, the Dana Foundation really attempts to advance neuroscience that benefits society and reflects the aspirations of all of us. We explore connections between neuroscience and society's challenges and opportunities, really working to maximize the potential of the field to do good. And here's a picture actually of a lot of the Dana Foundation staff at a meeting of the Science Philanthropy Alliance, which is a nonprofit that brings together many funders of science. And this meeting was actually around the topic of science and society. But like I said, the foundation has been around for a while, but recently in 2021, we shifted our focus to focusing on neuroscience and society. Moving on to sort of our values that I mentioned before, the foundation is very much guided by our values. I'll just go through them a little bit just to give you examples of sort of what we mean. First, we are bold. So that means neuroscience and society being sort of the unexplored frontier it is, we want to invest in really innovative ideas that move the field forward. And I think that relates to these professional development awards and research awards. We're really looking for innovation here, any new ideas that you might have. Second, we build trust. We confidently exploring new frontiers and collaboration with others requires, honesty, transparency, and respect. We really do try to be very transparent. That's part of the motivation behind doing this information session. We really want to make sure you have all the information you need to put together a solid proposal. We are collaborative, and you'll see this sort of show up throughout the RFPs. We really think neuroscience is too vast for any one organization or discipline to be the leader, so we really need all hands on deck to tackle some of these more complex problems. We value diversity from classrooms to communities. Neuroscience is for everyone, and we really do value diversity in its many forms, whether that's ethnic, racial, gender diversity, but also disciplinary diversity, as well as geographic diversity. We also lead with empathy. Neuroscience is about the totality of what humankind thinks, feels, and experiences. We really try to understand what the needs of our trainees in particular. And so, that these RFPs are really meant to come from a place of understanding so we can, sort of help help trainees really get the resources that they need. And lastly, we like to stay grounded. I think we want to be humble and say that we don't always have all the answers, but we're going to continuously search for them and do so collectively. So those are our values. Like I mentioned, they're on our website. You can always refer to them as you're writing your proposals. All right, so moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about the three major ways that Dana Foundation does its grant making. As I mentioned, Chinmay and I are part of the Dana NextGen program. I'll cover that last, but just wanted to give you a little bit about our other two programs, just in case you're interested in them and sort of want to learn more about them. So the first is called Dana Frontiers, and the goal of Dana Frontiers is to increase engagement with diverse publics to deepen trust and inform policy. So really what Dana Frontiers is interested in is bidirectional public engagement. We really want to move away from the deficit model where scientists speak to different publics in sort of a unidirectional way to one where scientists are in genuine conversation with communities and the stakeholders around them. So, Dana Frontiers supports projects sort of in that space. The second is Dana Education. And the goal of Dana Education is to spark interest and support education around neuroscience in the many ways it interfaces with our everyday lives. Dana Education focuses on programming, particularly for K through 12 audiences, the general public, as well as professionals such as physicians, lawyers, and neuroscientists. You might have heard of Brain Awareness Week. Brain Awareness Week is a long-running campaign that we have, and that resides in Dana Education. All right, moving on a little bit about our third program, Dana NextGen, which is the program that I lead. The goal of the Dana NextGen program is to strengthen neuroscience's positive role in the world by preparing the next generation of scholars to think reflexively and responsibly apply neuroscience knowledge to benefit society by supporting innovative training, workforce development, and collaboration across disciplines. So I want to say a little bit about each of these three objectives. So the first one is to really prepare trainees like you to think critically and reflexively about the various ethical, legal, and societal implications that are raised by neuroscience. And we try to do this through experiential learning, things like internships and research opportunities, fellowships, as well as innovative curricula and coursework. Second, we want to prepare trainees to go out into the world, both in academia and beyond that. So we support programs like the Dana Foundation Career Network for Neuroscience and Society, so that once you finish your training, you're able to find a career and take that training with you. And finally, we want to encourage rigorous, collaborative, cross-disciplinary work. Here, we really want to bring together neuroscientists with non-scientists to think about the complex problems we face as a society. We see both the Professional Development Awards and the Trainee Research Awards as falling into these objectives. We want to support trainees as they build skills, gain important mentors, and interact with others outside of their home discipline. Both of these grants are going to allow you to propose activities along these lines. And with that, I'll pass it off to Chinmay to tell you a little bit more about our Professional Development Awards.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and dive right in. So the Professional Development Awards, we may also refer to them as PD Awards throughout the webinar for short. And the main goal of these awards is to allow trainees to seek out opportunities that they are not really able to get in their home discipline. Trainees may request up to $5,000 for things like attending a conference or a workshop, or taking a course that isn't part of your major or graduate degree program, and other ways that can build upon your existing training. And you can also request up to an additional $500 to cover the costs of indirect costs at your institution. So your college or university may charge indirect costs as part of any grant that's received. And so these are overhead costs that help to cover anything that's non-research related. And the foundation does not usually allow for indirect costs, but for these awards, we are accounting and allowing for up to 10%. And to apply for these awards, you must be affiliated with an academic or a nonprofit institution that's based in the United States. And this means that you have to be enrolled in a training program or employed by a nonprofit organization. And that could be as an undergraduate student, as a post-baccalaureate student, as a graduate student, or as a postdoctoral trainee. And in terms of timing, the opportunity cannot begin before May 1st, 2025, and it has to be completed by April 30th of 2026. So if you have an opportunity that starts after April 30th of 2026, you would need to wait to apply for that opportunity until the next year's cycle. And unfortunately, if you have opportunities that take place earlier than May 1st of this year, 2025, they would not be eligible for this award. A little bit more about the requirements. The first is that the proposed opportunity needs to be interdisciplinary, and we want to clear up a little bit of confusion about what that means, specifically in relation to being interdisciplinary and demonstrating strong connections to neuroscience and society. So this means that the opportunity or the activity that you propose must include neuroscience and a field outside of the natural sciences or engineering. So that means things like computer science or AI studies or chemistry, engineering do not necessarily make it interdisciplinary in the way that we want here. Now, that could include things like ethics, law, philosophy, anthropology, social sciences like economics, public health, arts, and the humanities. And of course, the list is not exhaustive, but it's just meant to give you an idea of some examples. Now, second, the opportunity must be beyond the applicant's existing coursework, experiences, or training. So basically, we want you to be able to use these funds for something that you may not otherwise be able to be part of. We will not be overly limited in our approach, but you should clearly articulate how the opportunity would allow you to grow as a trainee and would supplement the existing experiences that you have. So, for example, if you were a philosophy undergraduate student who has a focus in bioethics or neuroethics, if you were applying to go to the International Neuroethics Society's annual meeting, that would not be eligible. And similarly, if you were, let's say, a neuroscience graduate student, you could not apply to go to the Society for Neuroscience conference through this award because that is the type of conference that neuroscience graduate students would traditionally go to, and it would not necessarily be something that's perhaps beyond your existing experiences or coursework. Continuing on, here are a few things that are not eligible. So first, you cannot do research with this PD award money, and we're going to talk about in a little bit a separate opportunity where you could propose such work. The second thing is that you cannot use these funds to put together an event or a workshop or a public engagement activity. If that's something that you're interested in and you have ideas related to that, we would encourage you to apply for a Brain Awareness Week grant, which Ishan had alluded to earlier. That's through our education program. And then we also want you to have a reasonable budget for your proposed opportunity. So that means really try your best to approximate how much it might actually cost, taking into account travel, lodging, food and meals, and etc. Another requirement is to identify a faculty mentor at your institution. Now, this mentor will not need to do much other than really be available to assist in case we have any trouble getting the funds to you at your institution. And often students aren't eligible to get the grants directly. So in those kinds of situations, the grant would go to your faculty mentor and then to you. And then lastly, after the activity is over and it's completed, trainees will be required to submit a brief written narrative about your experience and then also financial reporting that basically tracks how you had spent your funding. And here are some examples of past awards to kind of help you brainstorm and frame your application a little bit. So in the past, we have had an undergraduate trainee who was majoring in neuroscience apply to attend the International Neuroethics Society's annual meeting. A post-bac trainee who had an ethics background was interested in attending the Human and Mammalian Brain Atlas Consortium meeting that was hosted by the Allen Institute in Amsterdam. There was a graduate trainee with a focus on neuroscience who took a online neuroethical considerations course that was offered by Queen's University, and then another postdoc trainee in neuroscience who pursued training and experience in computer-generated art to better communicate neuroscience to the public. All right, and then some information about the review process and how we will pick who gets these awards. So Dana staff will read your proposal and then determine whether or not it meets the eligibility criteria, whether you've met all the requirements, and then whether it aligns with the goals and objectives of the NextGen program and also alignment with the Dana Foundation's values. Now, keep in mind, to pass this threshold, it does not mean that your proposed activity would have to meet all of the objectives of the Dana NextGen program or all of the values. And then if you make it past this threshold, your application would be placed into a pool, and the winners of the Professional Development Awards will be selected using a lottery system where the applicants from the pool are basically selected at random. And then here we have the link to the Giving Data application portal. And lastly, as a reminder, the application deadline is March 14th of this year at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. And with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Ishan to talk about the Trainee Research Awards.
Thanks, Chinmay. So yeah, I want to tell you a little bit about the Trainee Research Awards. This is actually the first time that we've done these awards. When we launched our PD awards last year, we found that many applicants pitched fully fledged research projects and wanted to use the PD money to fund it. And honestly, we weren't expecting this. So at the time, we had to decline almost all of those proposals for proposed research. But I think that gave us sort of an idea of, given how much interest we got in research projects, we wanted to create a mechanism for graduate students and postdocs to get funding for research projects in neuroscience and society. So if you have an idea for a research project, you can request up to $15,000 to support that project. And like the Professional Development Awards, you can request up to 10% to cover indirect costs. A lot of the same eligibility here. You must still be affiliated with a US-based nonprofit or university. However, this award is limited to only graduate students and postdocs. So while the PD awards are inclusive of undergraduates, post-baccalaureate folks, graduate students, and postdocs, this one is exclusively for only graduate students and postdocs. And the timeline for this is a little bit longer. So the activities can't start again before May 1st, but you have until December 31st of 2026 to complete your research activities. So that gives you roughly about 20 months for the project. So let's go over some of the types of research you can do and then some of them that you can't. So we'll start with the ones that, we'll start with the ones that you can do. So what we really don't want you to pitch, however, is a clinical trial or something that uses animals or patients. So really, we want research that is limited to things like surveys and questionnaires, interviews, focus groups. You could also look at case studies or do conceptual analyses. If you're a law student or someone interested in law, you could look at reviewing case law or policy analysis. You could also do systematic reviews where you aggregate existing studies on a topic. Most of this research is usually categorized in what may be called qualitative research or conceptual research, but I want to point out that you still can do quantitative research here in the form of surveys and questionnaires. So moving on to the things that aren't eligible, there cannot be any applied clinical or psychological research. We really request, please don't propose a study where you're testing an intervention and measuring its impact. It unfortunately will not be eligible. Also, what the funds from these, for the research awards cannot be used for the types of things that we covered in the PD award portion of the presentation. So for example, you can't use trainee research award money to go to a conference or similar things. So a lot of the requirements here, again, very similar to the PD award, so we won't go over them in too much detail again. But just to remind you, the activities have to be interdisciplinary. Really, the key there again is neuroscience and a non-science discipline. The budget really has to make sense. You need to find a faculty mentor to sort of apply with you in a sense. And you'll be asked to do some reporting. And for the research awards, the one additional piece of reporting is we'll ask you to write a paper on your project. Moving on to some of the requirements that are unique to the research awards, an important requirement is that you must get IRB approval from your institution. So how this will work is you'll apply for your research project. We'll review it. If it's funded, we'll send you an email saying you've been selected and you should go ahead and start applying for an IRB from your home institution. So then you'll file an application to your home institution IRB. Luckily, hopefully, they will approve it. And once you receive that approval, you'll send that back to the foundation, and that'll start the process of getting the funds directly to you. And research students, also the research studies that we're doing also must be considered exempt. And that's a categorization. If you look at different types of IRB approval, exempt status is one of those types. Most of the studies I mentioned on the last slide will be exempt under these categories. So things like qualitative research, things like surveys and questionnaires, particularly, when you're de-identifying the personal information of your potential study participants, those almost always do tend to be exempt. But if you have any questions about whether your research, counts as exempt, I'd encourage you to reach out to either your local IRB office, or you can email us directly. So here's an overview of the workflow that, I think we would recommend you go through to make sure that, you have all your ducks in a row. So first you would ask yourself, do you belong to an institution that can receive grants? If you can't, unfortunately, you won't be eligible. If you can, please next check whether your research mentor that you identified can receive grants. If they can't, your best probably approach would be to find a different research mentor, one that can accept these grants. If they can, the last thing you want to check is whether the mentor is familiar with the IRB process at your home institution and whether they can personally serve as a principal investigator. And the reason we ask this is often graduate students and postdocs at their institution cannot be technically principal investigators or PIs. That really just depends on your unique institution. A lot of the institutions have their own sort of separate rules. And if that was the case, we need your research mentor to be the PI. That mentor would then have to do things like apply for an IRB application. And so we want to make sure if your mentor can do these things. If they can, you're all set. If they can't, again, I think we would recommend that you identify a different mentor. So we won't get overly granular here, but want to say a little bit about the way that Dana staff will approach reviewing your research proposals. So first, we want to make sure that your project will have impact. So these are asking questions like, does it address an important problem or question that hasn't been answered? We really want you to clearly articulate, how your research will address that problem. Are there ethical, legal, societal implications that are raised? How will you collect the data to sort of help address these concerns? And we want you to be specific of how you will measure your data and really how you will know that once you get this data, that it'll influence the field or future work. The second big bucket is feasibility. So can you actually pull this off? We want to look and make sure that you have a clear path, you have actionable steps, and you have reasonable timelines. We want to see that you have a good budget, that you understand the costs that are associated, that you don't overestimate or underestimate what will be involved when it comes to materials, staffing, and other potential costs. We also want you to think about what you will do if things go wrong. Are there any risks that you can manage? Are there any challenges that might come up, and how will you deal with them? Finally, we'll assess whether your proposal is innovative. Again, going back to the foundation's value of being bold, we want to support unique and creative approaches to addressing needs. We truly believe that you are the future of this field, and we want to hear your ideas, especially if they depart from existing efforts. So again, after considering impact, feasibility, and innovation, the foundation staff will select which projects will get funded. And as we outlined earlier, if you're selected, then you'll then have to apply for IRB approval before you get the funds. Like the PD awards, the submission deadline is the same, March 14th at 11:59 Eastern Time. And I'll pass it off to Chinmay to cover some of our frequently asked questions.
All right. So a list of some of the common questions that we get here. One of them is that, do I need to be affiliated with a neuroscience department? And the answer is no. You do not need to have a formal affiliation. For the Professional Development Award, going back to what we discussed earlier, all that we require is that applicants meet those two criteria of one, being currently affiliated with an academic or a nonprofit institution in the US, and the second is being enrolled in a training program employed by a nonprofit as an undergrad, a post-bac, a grad student, or a postdoc trainee. However, please note that, like Ishan mentioned earlier, only graduate students and postdoc trainees are eligible to apply for the Trainee Research Awards. Another question is, could I potentially apply as a team of two with another eligible trainee? And the answer is yes. So we would request that you please detail the potential roles of yourself and your co-applicant in carrying out the proposed activities. And if you plan to work together, you could submit just one joint application through the Giving Data portal online. So there's no need to submit separate applications. And for application purposes, one of you would need to serve as the primary contact. This person would basically create the account and submit personal details in the requested fields and take care of those logistics. And when you are uploading your CV files to the portal, we would ask that you please merge both you and your co-applicant's CV files into a single doc and upload that as just one file. For the Trainee Research Awards, could the research mentor for your proposed project be different than direct principal investigator, PI, or advisor at university? And the answer here is yes. Your research mentor for the purposes of the award could be any faculty member at your home institution. And beyond supporting your research project, we ask that your mentor could potentially serve as an administrative contact in case the Trainee Research Award funds cannot be awarded directly to you. The next question is, what does it mean for a proposed activity to be interdisciplinary in nature and demonstrate strong connections to neuroscience and society? And again, going back to what we had described a little bit earlier, basically you really want to have a project that combines neuroscience with a field that falls outside of the natural sciences and engineering. So as an example, a project combining neuroscience and computer science would technically involve two distinct disciplines, but it would not meet the specific criteria for these PD and Trainee Research Awards, as we would consider computer science to fall under that natural sciences and engineering umbrella. But we consider the fields like ethics, law, philosophy, social sciences, sociology, anthropology, public health, arts, and humanities to fall outside of that umbrella. So again, a proposed activity that meaningfully is going to connect neuroscience with any of those listed areas would be viewed as being interdisciplinary and demonstrating strong connections to neuroscience and society. Another question is, how specific do I need to be about the indirect costs in my budget? And really, just stating indirect costs, $500 as a line item, as an approximation in the budget would be sufficient, and that's all we need there. If you are a postdoc trainee who's wondering, perhaps you've completed your PhD several years ago, 5 or so years ago, would I still be eligible to apply? Generally speaking, you are eligible to apply if your title includes the term postdoctoral. However, these positions are often time limited, and trainees who received their PhD more than 5 years ago are often not eligible. Early career positions are not eligible for the awards, basically. For example, assistant professors, research scientists, staff researchers, etc., would not be eligible to receive the award. And if you are uncertain if your specific title is eligible or not, please feel free to reach out for further clarification. And a couple more. One is, could the proposed activity begin earlier than May 1st of this year? And the answer is that unfortunately, we are not able to accommodate proposed activities that take place earlier. That's because the time required to develop and finalize contracts with awardees has in the past taken several months to complete, and we just want to make sure that we have adequate time to make that happen. Is there a limit on the number of potential students or trainees who might be submitting applications from one university? And the answer is no. There is no limit on the number. However, please note that we will only be considering one application per individual. We will not be awarding funding to the same person via multiple proposals, basically. And then if you've previously received a professional development award, are you eligible to apply once more? And the answer is you are welcome to apply for the Trainee Research Award, but if you have already received a PD award, then you cannot apply for it again. Last one here is, I don't currently have a mentor at my academic or nonprofit institution who has expertise in neuroscience and society. So how could I find a relevant mentor? And we recognize that it can be really hard to find the right mentor at your home institution, especially because a lot of these areas we're talking about are very interdisciplinary. And so we would suggest that potentially faculty members who focus on bioethics, neuroethics, or science and technology studies may be some good mentors to keep an eye out for and get in contact with.